Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear,
business consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.
Welcome. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Are you interested in maximizing your potential, building better and more meaningful relationships, perhaps overcoming a personal challenge, or even landing a new job? Well, on this episode, we're going to explore the one skill standing between us and success. Our guest is a husband and father, a sociologist, author of several books and numerous scholarly articles. He teaches at the University of Michigan in the Ross School of Business, where he's been a professor there for over 25 years. He's also the faculty director at the Center for Positive Organizations. Please welcome the author of All You Have to Do Is Ask, Dr. Wayne Baker. Wayne, so great to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Jay. I'm delighted to be here.
Outstanding. Well, I've got to share with you, and I mentioned this before we started recording, that researching you has been a pleasure for me. I'm so excited about the conversation I know we're going to be digging into, and the work that you do is truly remarkable. So let's dig right into it. So first, I'd love to find out when you first knew that you were going to have a career in academia.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't come from an academic family. I'm actually a first-generation college student, and I ended up going all the way through and getting a PhD and spending most of my career as a professor in a business school. But I wasn't always planning to do that. You know, in fact, I didn't even know what a PhD was when I was in college. And I accidentally applied to a PhD program that I thought was a master's program. And I got in, but I ended up going someplace else to get my PhD. So there was a lot of accidents, serendipity, and sheer luck.
So if we were to wind back a little bit, so what had you envisioned for your career early on?
Yeah, I was a finance major, if you can believe that, because I'm a sociologist, but I was a finance major and had a Bachelor of Science in finance. And I was going to work for a big bank in downtown Chicago. But when I went and saw what it was like, I said, you know, I love studying finance, but I don't think I want to be a banker. And I don't think I want to do this as a job. And I said, you know, all right, so what's 180 degrees from finance? And well, I said, that must be sociology. And not knowing a whole lot about it, I entered a graduate program in sociology. I actually found it, at least for me, was harder than finance. But, you know, luck struck again because the combination of those two, the finance and economics knowledge and sociology, really helped to create some new ideas, some new innovations in the field. You know, like innovations arise where two different fields overlap, like the scales of a fish. It's actually called the fish scale theory of innovation. And without design, I did that. And it's been, you know, the source of lots of ideas.
Outstanding. So you, in doing some research on you, after you earned your PhD, but before you became a professor, you had a career in the consulting industry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I wanted to get some real world experience. And I worked as a partner in a small consulting firm in Washington, D.C. I love the people I worked with. But again, I decided that it wasn't really the life or the lifestyle that I wanted. The money was good, but I couldn't pick the projects that I wanted to work on and spend as much time as I want on them. To do that, you got to be a professor. So it was at that point I decided to pursue that route.
Excellent. So what were some of the experiences that you had in that role, in the management consulting role, that you took with you? So whether it was around culture, values, leadership, are there specific things that you can point to that you that you learned that you have been able to apply throughout your academic career?
Yeah, one of the big takeaways from that experience was to learn about the importance of workplace culture. And that if you're in a workplace that has a positive culture where people freely give and get help from one another, they're not afraid to admit mistakes, they're all working together for a common vision that's inspiring and something that they're passionate about, that's really a key to success. And so, I guess in some ways I've tried to study that and have helped businesses to figure out, well, how could you make your workplace culture even more generous, even more positive, knowing that people will thrive and you'll produce better results as well.
Yeah. Such an important point. And we're certainly going to be digging more deeply into your most recent book, but I do want to ask you about the work that you're doing with the Center for Positive Organizations. Can you first maybe give us a thumbnail sketch of what the center does and the type of work that you're involved in there and how you're helping organizations today?
And so the mission of the Center for Positive Organizations is to advance research and practice around the idea of thriving organizations. So you think about what is a thriving organization? It's one that produces great outcomes and not just financial outcomes, but has a positive impact on society, for example. And the means by which you produce those outcomes are also positive, where people thrive, where they get to play to their strengths, where they're inspired, where they want to be in the workplace. So it's positive means that produce positive ends, broadly defined. And perhaps a shorthand way of thinking about it is to take positive psychology and ask, well, what does that mean at the group, the team, or the organizational level? And that's what we do at the center.
Okay. So as you look around the business landscape today, is there an organization, a business that you can point to that is checking all the main boxes when it comes to a positive organization?
Yeah, there are several. In fact, I cover many of them in my MBA classes. I can give you a big one, then I give you a couple of small ones. So a big one would be Southwest Airlines. The only airlines that has been consistently profitable for over 50 years now, continues to win all sorts of awards and accolades for its positive workplace and its incredible results. It grew from a little regional carrier in Texas to become the largest domestic carrier in the US. And they had a couple of big tests of their model. The biggest test, of course, is what's testing all of us is this global pandemic, and that really impacted the airline industry, many other industries as well. But they were the only airline that didn't lay anyone off or furlough anyone.
Hmm.
And again, they had that pledge to invest in their people, to build a workplace culture, and job security was a really big part of that. So that's a big company.
Okay.
A small one. Fortunately, I live in a positive ecosystem here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there are several. One is Zingerman's Community of Businesses. It's in the food and hospitality business, about $60 million business, a very positive culture. Another one would be Menlo Innovations, which is a software development firm headquartered here in Ann Arbor, who their catchword is a joy, to create a joyful workplace, or what I would call a thriving workplace. And those are just two of the several companies that I feature in my courses.
Love those examples. I'd like to, if we could, maybe unpack a little bit on the two smaller business examples that you just gave. Obviously, Southwest is a much bigger company. Lots of great information is available around their culture and around how they love their people and love their customers, which I love that aspect of it. So if we look at these two smaller company examples that you gave, when those businesses were originally formed, had the culture already been established in terms of a culture around positivity and thriving and taking care of their people and their customers? Or is this something that evolved over time and they made very specific changes that have helped them improve and become the businesses they are today?
I think it's both. Both of these companies started very small here in Ann Arbor with just a handful of people, but they did have a positive workplace culture at that point. And then over time, as they grew and they were successful, people want to work there. They really love working there. They get training and education, a lot of support. Well, then, they learned as they grew how to maintain and sustain and even strengthen a positive culture over time. And it's interesting, the CEOs of both of these companies are also prolific book writers. And so there's books about this joyful culture at Menlo Innovations and about the positive culture, the thriving culture at Zingerman's Community of Businesses. And I actually write about both of them in my book as well.
Terrific. So if you were sitting across from a small business owner today who was looking to improve on their own culture within their business, if they're looking to create a more thriving organization and create stronger team dynamics, what are some of the first areas that you would suggest that they pay attention to? Where I'm going with this, I'd love to be able to maybe share some tactical things that a small business owner could start to pay attention to and could start to put into practice.
Well, one way if you have a positive culture is that a lot of people are applying to jobs in your company, even though you can only hire, a small number of them. So I always look to the hiring and retention process first. And I would ask, what kind of people do you seek? What kind of people do you hire, retain, and promote? Are they other oriented? Are they net positive energizers? Are they contributors? Are they givers? Or are they lone wolves who really are out for their own betterment and advancement, don't play well with everyone else? At Menlo Innovations, Rich Sheridan, the CEO, says that we hire on kindergarten skills. The ability to get along, to be nice to one another, to be polite, et cetera. So the first thing is that, what kind of people are you hiring and bringing into the organization? Then the next step is, what do you do with them once they're there? So there's always a long hiring process to get into a company that has a thriving organization, because you don't just have one interview or two interviews. You might have a group interview or actually have a trial shift at Zingerman's, or you have to work for a couple of weeks as a programmer at Menlo. You get paid, but you've got to see whether it's going to be a good fit or not. And then from there, do you invest in your people in terms of continuous education and training, both internally and externally? That seems to be another hallmark of a thriving organization. And then the third point I would make is, do you have a vision of a positive future? So it's not just having a passionate or a really motivating purpose, but rather, if you live that purpose, what does the world look like 5 years from now? Can you describe that world in vivid detail? Is your description inspiring? If you have that, then that's where you're heading. And then you can figure, okay, well, what do we need to do? If that's our destination, what do we need to do to get there?
Wow. Love that. Some great feedback there, and some great things that we can all take a look at within our own businesses and start to apply. So thank you so much for sharing that. And for those that are watching and listening right now, I certainly hope you have your pen and paper out, because you're already getting some great information here. And we're going to continue to dig deeper and make sure that we are sharing relevant information that's pouring value into you. So Wayne, thank you for that. So I would love to delve into your most recent book, All You Have to Do Is Ask. And that book is really, it's broken down into two primary sections. You've got the power of the ask itself, and asking for and getting what you need. So that's really the toolkit piece of this. And what's great about this book is it's chock full of actionable information. So section 2 is an example where you talk about providing a toolkit, it truly is a toolkit. I mean, there's some great resources there to be able to apply. So let's delve into that if we could. I would love it if you would share some good pieces of information from each of those sections. And let's start with section number 1, the power of the ask. Why is this so important?
Yes, part 1 is about the problem and the promise of asking. So the problem is that almost everyone struggles with asking for what they need. People tend to be very, very generous, willing to help other people, but really struggle with coming up with, figuring out what my own needs are, what resources do I need, having a clear vision of what I need those for, and so forth. So, and there's a lot of reasons we don't ask. A lot of things get in the way, and I have a chapter about that. For example, sometimes we don't ask because we figure no one can help us. So why bother asking? But the research here is really helpful for updating that belief. The research says that, even strangers will help you if you ask, surprisingly so. Another common barrier, and I write about it, is, we don't ask sometimes because we're afraid that we're going to appear to be incompetent or weak or ignorant, or we can't do our jobs, we can't do our work. But the research here, again, is helpful because it says, as long as you make a thoughtful request, people will think you are more competent, not less. Right? And then I also talk about in part 1, here's what can happen. And I give stories about amazing things that have happened, even near miracles that have happened because people were willing to ask for what they needed. And it really, motivated the generosity that naturally exists in just about all of us. So that's part 1. And part 2 is the toolbox.
So before we go to part 2, I when I was taking a look at part 1 and digging into that section, the fear component resonated quite well with me. And it was, I look back over my career to this point, and there were so many times when I should have and would have benefited greatly by asking for help. And I really tried to think about what was blocking me from reaching out to someone. And it really was fear. And it was fear that not only would I possibly look incompetent, but I was also fearful that if I was asking for help, it would come across as if I couldn't handle that myself, that I didn't have either the skills or the ability to be able to learn something or be able to reach out and meet someone, as an example, on my own, that I was reliant on other people. Mm-hmm. And Wayne, I don't know where that comes from, quite frankly. I don't know if that is something that is inherent in who I am, if it was part of my upbringing, but whatever the case is, I had to work to overcome that. And I still struggle with that a bit, but I am much further along now than I was years ago.
Yeah, it's very common experience. And it comes from our culture and our educational system. And I talk about this as the principle of self-reliance. And what stands in the way is when we over-rely on self-reliance and try to do it by ourselves for too long, when in fact, if we stop, ask for input, advice, help, resources, you could solve the problem faster, more effectively, more creatively. But we're taught to be very self-reliant. It's one of the strongest principles, at least in American culture, and many other Western cultures as well. And I think that's one of the barriers that we need to have to get over. And when you realize that you could be much more effective by asking for advice and input from other people, once you realize that and practice that and experience that, that's a way of overcoming that particular hurdle.
Interesting. So take us to section number 2.
Let me back up to what the origin of the book was, and then I'll see why I wrote it this particular way. So, almost 21 years ago, Cheryl Baker and I created an activity called the Reciprocity Ring. And it's a process, and there's props and all kinds of things. We train people how to do it. But essentially, and it's going to sound simpler than it actually is, it's a structured way in which people ask for something that they need, and they spend most of their time helping other people. And what they find is that the people that you help are not the people who help you, but rather other people. So it's like, I make a request, you help me, I feel grateful. And of course, I would return the favor, but I'm also more motivated to pay it forward and help someone else. And that's what's created in this reciprocity ring. And about 300,000 people now have done it around the world. It's been done in different languages, different cultures. People would say, oh, it'll never work in this culture, and they'll name it. And I said, well, it does work in that, and I have a theory about why that might be the case. But way back then, I always started the activity the same way, which was a little lecture about the importance of being generous, of being a giver. But I very quickly found out that that was never the problem. People were incredibly generous, but people struggled coming up with a request. And unless we're mind readers, we can't help someone, right? They have to verbalize the request. They have to make the ask. And so I shifted my focus to, all right, why is it so hard to ask for what we need? How can we overcome that? And then what people always asked me for was, okay, all right, you motivated me, but I don't know how to do it. I need tools. Give me a toolbox. And so that was really the motivation for the book. And so part 2, which is the main part of the book, is that toolbox, as you said. And it starts with the individual. What can you do individually? And then it moves up to the level of teams. There's a chapter called Tools for Teams, a lot of very specific concrete practices that teams like at Menlo Innovations, for example, will use to increase giving and asking in their culture. And then all the way up to the organizational level. So it's at all 3: tools for the individual, for the team, and for the organization.
Love it. So let's start with the individual then, because I absolutely want to be able to highlight some of these specific actions that can be taken. And we will certainly provide a link for the book in the show notes, because we want to encourage everyone to go out and get a copy of this book, because there's so much detail in there. But let's go ahead and highlight a couple of things that the individual can take away from this. So what can an individual ask? How can they get better at asking for help?
So the first thing is to figure out what you need and why. So I mentioned before that if you make a thoughtful request, people will think you are more competent, not less. So there are 4 parts to a thoughtful request. And the first part is, what's your goal? What's the objective? What are you trying to achieve? It's amazing, Jay. Sometimes people ask for something, they get it, and then they discover they really don't need it, or what they really needed was something else. It's because they weren't clear about what they were trying to accomplish from the beginning. So I always tell people the first thing is to pause and think about what you're trying to accomplish. Like in the morning, you could say, okay, well, what am I trying to accomplish today? And where would help, assistance, resources be an advantage, would be a benefit. So what do I need? What am I trying, what am I trying to accomplish, the goal? And then the second part is, okay, given that goal, given that destination, what resources do I need? Do I need to talk to an expert? Do I need a referral or a connection? Do I need advice from someone? Do I need financial resources, whatever it might be? All right, that's part 2 of a thoughtful request. I got the goal, I got the resource that I need. Now I want to make a smart request. A smart request. So smart for me means a little bit different from SMART goals, similar but different. So the S is specific. The more specific your request, the more actionable it is. Sometimes people say, I'm going to make a very general request because I'll cast a wide net. Well, people can't respond to a general request. In fact, I'm just remembering probably the most general request I ever heard was from an executive from the Netherlands, and he was participating in one of our programs here at Executive Education at the Ross School, and I was running one of my activities that I write about in the book. And he said, well, my request is for information. And I said, okay, well, can you elaborate? He goes, no, it's confidential. I can't say anything more. Right. So, he got no help, of course. He was generous. He did help other people, but no one could help with that. So it's specific. That's the S. The M, and this is different from the M for SMART goals, which is measurable, which is great. But here it's meaningful. It's the why of the request. Why are you making this request? Why is it so important? Oftentimes that's left off. And you really need to tell people why this is important, why you're asking. The A is action. You're asking for something to be done. So restating a goal is not a request. What do you need to be done to get a resource to achieve that goal? So it has to be actionable. The R is for strategically realistic. So I encourage big requests, stretch requests, but they still have to be within the realm of possibility. And then the T is time. You have to have a deadline. And again, the more specific the deadline, the more actionable and more motivating it will be. Now we've got 3 of the 4 so far. We've got the goal. We've got the resource you need. You figure that out. You formulate a smart request, and then you figure out who to ask and make the ask. And there's a number of different ways that you can ask. You can ask an individual. You can ask in a group. You could post it, in LinkedIn or wherever. There's a lot of ways you can go with that.
Wow. It's great information there. So I want to tap or add on to something that you just brought up, and that's around the ask in social media. So let's take LinkedIn as an example. It seems that when I make a connection on LinkedIn, if it's someone that I don't know, but they're asking for a connection request and I accept it, within minutes, if it's someone that I don't know, within minutes, I typically get a message or an ask right off the bat. There's been no, let me figure out how I can serve you. Let me figure out what your challenges are to see if there's something that I can do to bring value to you without building rapport. It's just going right for the ask.
Yep.
Is that an appropriate method of connecting with someone?
It's common. I wouldn't say that it's appropriate. But when I get those, as long as I have enough time, I try to respond. I often get one from a financial advisor or a retirement special or something. And, I always try to have at least, I said, thanks for connecting. I'm all set for now. I don't have any needs in that area, but we're connected now for the future in case that changes. I always say something like that if I can, rather than not respond. I could do that. If I'm overwhelmed, I might not be able to do all those, but I really try to do that because I realize the person's just trying to make a living. They're just, and particularly now where you can't, meet people and shake their hands and have them in your office and stuff. I just appreciate that people, they're trying to make a living. Right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but I think that a better way to use LinkedIn is to, for example, find people that you have something in common with, some affinity. For example, you have the same alma mater, you went to the same school, or you have the same profession or the same interests or the same hobbies, whatever it is, and connect with those people around some common interest that you have. So the great advantage of LinkedIn is that it enables you to reach out into the world's network in a way that you can potentially connect with people you would never have the opportunity to connect with otherwise. Another way would be to join a Facebook group. So a Facebook group that's dedicated to a particular interest or a hobby or whatever, there's some like-minded people and they have similar interests. But again, it's a diverse group, and diversity is really good because it's those diverse contacts that might know where job opening is or where information is.
Yeah.
And then we've also, based on the principles in my book, created Givitas, which is a digital platform. I described the Reciprocity Ring. Well, imagine that on a huge scale. And there, people join a network, a community of people who might be interested in HR, for example, or people analytics. So they have that in common. And the platform is built entirely around these principles of creating a safe place in which people, it's known that you're going to ask. That's one of the reasons for being in it, but you're also going to be generous in helping other people. And it's really astounding what happens there. In fact, I used it when I was writing my book. For example, the HR, Givitas for HR, I'd be in that group and I'd say, oh, I need a new example about X. Can anyone help me? And I connected with people like in Alaska, who, oh, here's how we do it here, and I said, oh, can I interview you? Sure, we could had an interview. So never would have met those people if I hadn't used social media.
Oh, that is outstanding. I love that. Well, we'll make sure that we are sharing information and sharing a link to Givitas as well. And you also have an assessment that you've created that you provide in the book, but you can also go onto your website and take this assessment. So I'd love for you to speak to that assessment, why it was created, the type of response that you received from it. What does the assessment tell us? And more importantly, what can we do about the results?
So the assessment takes maybe 4 minutes, and there's a free version on my website, the website for the book, as you know. And if you enter your email, you'll get a customized report. And you can see how you compare to a very large population of assessment takers. So it's very interesting in that comparative sense. And it essentially asks about two dimensions. One is, how frequently do you ask for help? And we have a number of questions about that, help to get a sponsor, help to whatever. And then the other is, how often do you give help? And so you get a score, you get a giving score, and you get an asking score. And with that, you can see how you stack up against, everyone else who has taken the assessment. And when you do, you'll see that overwhelmingly, people fall in what I call the overly generous giver category. Those are people who rarely ask for what they need, if ever, but they're very generous. They give and they help lots of people. Now, you would say, now, why would I call somebody overly generous? Well, it is possible to be too generous. It's like, if you don't put boundaries on it, you could deplete your energy, deplete your resources, not be able to live up to your commitments, and so forth. Right. The other thing is that, and overly generous people often experience burnout as a result, is that you have to put boundaries around it, reasonable boundaries, but also balance it by asking for what you need. So with this, you can figure out, are you one of four types? So most likely you're an overly generous giver, or at least a very generous giver. The opposite of that, and fortunately we don't see many, but we see some, it would be that selfish taker. The person who has no problem asking, but they don't give help. And a friend of mine who used to work at IBM Consulting, and he said, when I described this to him, he goes, "Oh, we call them sponges. They just suck you at everything and they never give a drop back."
Right.
And over time, people stop helping them because they figure out what's going on. The second most common category, there are four. The second most common is kind of a tragic category. It's the lone wolf, the person who's isolated, the person who doesn't ask and who doesn't give. They're just trying to be self-reliant. They got their head down. They're just trying to do the work. They're not giving help and they're not asking, and they have low productivity as a result of that, because you really do need input from other people, resources from other people, advice and so forth to really be effective. The best place to be, and this is the fourth type, is what I call the giver requester. It's the person who is generous, will help people freely, don't keep track of, who helped me and who didn't help me, help anyone who needs help, with reasonable boundaries. And you frequently ask for what you need when you have a need. And probably about 10% of the people who take the assessment are in that category. But once you see where you are in this assessment, you can say, okay, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to start moving into that giver requester category? And that's when the tools and practices in the book are helpful.
Perfect. So I would encourage everyone not to only go get the book, which is absolutely something that you should be doing, but definitely take this assessment. It's an interesting one. As Wayne said, it doesn't take very long at all to take, but it provides you some great feedback and will give you at least a good picture of where you are today, snapshot in time. And then what can I do about that? Start applying the tools in the toolkit. So at this point, approximately how many people have actually taken the assessment online?
Oh, that's a good question. I think in the report, there would be a few thousand people that you can compare yourself to, but we've had many thousands of people more. But we're still in the process of analyzing those data before we add them to the report.
Okay. All right. Very good. So what additional research are you focused on right now that you haven't necessarily been involved in the past, but what are you doing to continue to grow and to to keep new and exciting information coming out into the market?
Well, my book was published in January of last year, January of 2020, so pre-pandemic. And a lot of the practices I talk about are face-to-face routines or practices. And what I've learned during the pandemic is that all of them can be done virtually as well. So that's what I'm focusing on now. And let me give you one example of that. So the daily stand-up, very common in software development firms and IT, but I think it has widespread application. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, our staff at the Center for Positive Organizations has their daily stand-up. Just one example that's outside of the software tech world. And so the daily stand-up is usually done as a physical stand-up where people will stand in a circle, and each person has to address 3 points. What did I work on yesterday? Here's what I'm working on today, and here's some help or resource that I need. And then it goes to the next person and the next person. And the reason that a routine like this is really helpful is that it normalizes the process of asking. It makes asking an expectation. Not asking is letting the group down, because the rules are you have to say what I did yesterday, what I'm working on today, and what do I need, and make a request, right? So it makes it a lot easier if you know that it's expected, it's normal, everyone's in the same boat. It's not like we put a big spotlight on you and we're all going to be really safe and watch you from a distance while you make your request. I mean, that doesn't work, right? But if you have to go around the circle, well, you could do that, and we do it now in Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any of the other platforms that people use. It's very easy to do a daily stand-up that way, so that would be one. So what I'm looking at now is, okay, all the ways in which in this new world that we can still use all these practices, but we do it virtually now.
Makes perfect sense. I worked for a tech company for a short period of time, and to your point, we would do daily stand-ups, and it was very effective, and it was a great opportunity to collaborate, to share what was going on. And I honestly, during those stand-ups, I never felt the pressure or that the spotlight was on any individual person. It was really just a matter of sharing to the team. And I could see where there would be tremendous benefit today and being able to do that virtual as well. And I know many companies that are doing that. So that's a good one. So what would you like your legacy to be?
Well, I'm sort of in the last stage of my career, and I've sort of shifted over time to do research that the mission is to be helpful to other people. It's like an opportunity to give back based on what I've learned over the years. And so my book is a mechanism for doing that, of giving back, empowering people to ask for what they need, to do it in an appropriate way, to instill and implement these practices in teams and organizations, knowing that by doing so, amazing things can happen. I mean, it frees up resources. You discover what you need to be more creative, to be more effective, to live out your mission, to accomplish that vision that you have for yourself, or the vision for your team, or for your organization. So that's what I try to do with my students, with my MBA students, is give them things that are useful, that they can apply in the workplace, and that will make a positive difference for their lives. And so that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Love it. Now, I know that your most recent book came out in 2020. Is there another book inside of you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. There might be one further developing this idea of thriving organizations. And I think the course that I teach in our MBA program kind of goes through the whole process of building a thriving organization. And so I'm toying with that as an idea. And then completely separate from it, I'm thinking about, I don't know, maybe I ought to write the great American novel.
Ooh, all right.
But Jay, it's interesting. I've read a lot of people have been doing that, or trying to do that, right, during this pandemic, when if we're fortunate, we get to work remotely and still do our jobs and get paid and so forth. And people are trying a lot of different things. So I actually think writing a novel would be harder than writing a nonfiction book, but maybe that's just because I've written nonfiction books before.
Well, If I were a betting man, I would say that that book is going to develop itself inside of you and come out, because if it's already there and you're planting the seeds and you've got the voice for it, you have to get that out. So I look forward to that one. That'll be interesting. So, what is something that you believed about yourself that you discovered wasn't true?
Hmm. Something that I believed about myself that I discovered wasn't true was that I could be self-sufficient, that I could do it all on my own. And I discovered that that wasn't true, and that I could be much more effective and, in fact, a lot easier by collaborating with other people, partnering with other people. And I can give you a really quick, very concrete example. So I do a lot of research. A lot of it's quantitative research. Sometimes it uses statistics that I really don't know, but I know that I need them, right? So what I've discovered is that instead of trying to learn that esoteric statistical routine, I can walk down the hall, find a friend who is a statistician and say, hey, would you like to collaborate on this project with me? Here's my idea. Here's the data. Would you help with the analysis? And we'll be co-authors on this article together. Well, it turns out that I can get work done that I wouldn't be able to do on my own otherwise, without a lot of pain and agony, if ever. And it's a lot more fun working with other people than just working alone.
We're stronger together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you look for inspiration today? I'm wearing this shirt for you, by the way.
That's what I found that inspiring to see that your shirt. And also I find this conversation to be inspiring to me, and that it increases my motivation to continue doing what I'm doing. So where do I find inspiration? I think these days I've been finding it in little things. I've been finding it in colleagues who are struggling to teach from home when they've got little kids running around and having to do that. And, they're somehow pulling it together. I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired by my students, many of whom have not been able to come back to the country, but I still stay in touch with them, and we work together through Zoom and other things. I find their willingness and their dedication to keep going with their education and of finding a way. And then the third thing I would say is that I'm inspired and exceedingly grateful by all the essential workers out there who put themselves in harm's way on our behalf. I'm fortunate that I can go, order groceries online and go, and some nice person will put them in the trunk of my car. And I recognize how lucky I am and my family is that we can do that. But there are people in that store, or people who aren't, they have to go shopping themselves, or they can't do it. Right. So, I'm incredibly grateful for what we have. And I'm inspired these days by all those little acts of courage and heroism.
Mm. I feel you on that. I'm right there too. Just out of curiosity, do you have a gratitude practice?
I do it on an occasional basis. It's more like a part of meditation,
Hmm.
or a practice that I learned from Ari, the CEO of Zingerman's. I mentioned Zingerman's earlier on, part of our little ecosystem that we have here. And he has a practice that I have found helpful called 3 and out. And 3 and out is that when he's feeling down or de-energized or something, he'll look for 3 opportunities to acknowledge someone, appreciate someone, or congratulate someone. So these, I might do it by a phone call or a text or something. Sometimes I'll do it. My son, he's a freshman in college. He's away. It might be a little text I'll give to him where I remembered something about him growing up and things we would do together, and I'm grateful for that memory. So it's that kind of thing that I will do. And I also I also did a gratitude intervention that I learned from the staff at the Center for Positive Organizations. So one of my class, so imagine 95 MBA students all doing this class with me over Zoom, and I'm teaching about generosity. I said, okay, you've got 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, you need to text somebody in your life and to tell them what you're grateful for about them. And don't just say, a couple of vague words, I'm giving you 10 minutes because you need to be specific. Right.
Mm.
And so they did that. And about a half an hour later, we were doing other things. Half hour later, I said, okay, so what happened? And it was amazing, that people responded right away, or somebody said, oh, my daughter came in and threw her arms around me, or, my wife said, are you okay? It was all kinds of funny things happened too. But, it was that little quick, and I said, that's something we can all do. We can, right now, we could take 3 minutes to send a quick text to somebody saying what we're grateful for about them.
Wow, that's so powerful, and it's so true. I tell you, it's giving me chills thinking about it and thinking about what you shared about the 3 and out and that exercise. Gratitude is something that's incredibly important to me, and it's been really a life changer, Wayne. It's just part of my every morning. So I have a journal that I write in, and I spend, it may only be 5 minutes or less, but it's just taking that pause that you spoke about earlier and recognizing the things that are truly important in my life. Because when we show up to the world with gratitude, when our eyes are open, we're appreciative of what we have. Like you brought up the different first responders and those that are out there every day working hard, the things that we should be grateful for, our lives change. I mean, it brings a level of joy and appreciation for everything around us. And how could you not show up more empowered, happier, with a very different disposition when you start off with gratitude?
Yeah, that was very well said. Very well said.
Thank you. Thank you. So before I ask my final question to you, please share with us all the places we can connect with you so we can make sure that we're putting those in the show notes and consuming your amazing content.
Oh, well, thank you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. So you can just look me up, Wayne Baker, find me that way. And if you ask for a connection, I will accept it and be grateful for our connection. You can go to my personal website, which is my name.org. So waynebaker.org. And there's a whole bunch of stuff there. And then finally, to go to the book website, which has lots and lots of free resources. There's the assessment that we mentioned. There's a very colorful learning map that an artist created for me. There's various recordings and articles and so forth. And that's the title of the book.com. So all you have to do is ask.com. And I would invite people to go there and to take advantage of all those free resources.
Outstanding. So much great information out there. So here's my final question to you. So what is one of the most valuable lessons that you've learned from a student of yours that you didn't expect?
I would say that would be my student, my son, who's a freshman in college. And he's away living in the dorms in another state and taking most of his classes remotely. And so when he was here over the December holiday, I asked him, he was about to turn 19. I said, I'm going to teach his class starting remotely in January. Can you coach me? Can you tell me what's worked for you and what doesn't work? And he gave me unexpected and the best advice. He says, when something goes wrong with technology, don't apologize and go, oops, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, maybe I'll do, oh, hold on. Oh, I got to figure this out. He said, just don't say anything. Just fix it and go on. I never would have guessed that, because my tendency when something goes wrong is to start talking about it, right? And he said that is not effective at all. So that was a complete surprise, but our children are our teachers.
Outstanding. Love that. Well, I hope he has an opportunity to listen to this when it comes out so he can hear that example and how meaningful it was to you. I think that's fantastic. So, Wayne, thank you so very much for being here today. I'm grateful for you. I appreciate you being so open, sharing of your knowledge and of your experience, bringing your books to life. And there are other books available that you've written as well. And spending some time with us, sharing with our audience. So thank you so very much.
Oh, Jay, thank you. I really appreciate having this opportunity. I'm inspired by you and the work you're doing and by being a mechanism for spreading the good word out there in the world. And so thank you.
Absolutely. And for all of you that are watching and listening, thank you for being here today and spending some time with us. And I tell you what, I've got an ask, because if you don't ask, you don't receive. And here it is. So please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review for us. Let us know what you thought of this particular episode and maybe share one or two takeaways with us. We would love that. And to enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can build a solid foundation for your service-based business, just visit jayshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning and growing, ask for help, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear. Jay Shear.
Business Consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.